Okay, according to my computer, it's 6 p.m. I'd like to call this meeting to order. Councillor Kozlowski is excused from this evening's proceedings, so we do have a quorum of the council and will proceed to any members of the Budget Committee who have joined or are listening later. Thank you very much. We'll acknowledge you at the end as well. And thank you to anyone else who is appearing live with us this evening or is listening later. The purpose of this meeting is to conduct a public hearing in consideration of the 2024-2025 budget, which includes the proposed uses of state revenue sharing funds. I'd like to just give a little context. This is the last in a series of meetings that have been held to develop, review, consider, and question this year's budget. It's a process we follow with some rigor every year, and the basic nuts and bolts of it remain the same and unchanged. We have first had a presentation where Layla, who is our budget officer, Layla Aman, our city manager and our budget officer, presented the budget to the full budget committee, which, as many of you or all of you on the call now recognize, is the full city council. In addition, there are 5 citizen members of that committee who are appointed, and I'll be calling them out and recognizing them at the end of this call as well. So we received that budget from Layla, and then we had a lengthy work session where all 10 of us reviewed together the budget as it was submitted. This was a chance to ask questions, have them answered in a public forum. That is in addition to work that many council members and budget committee members did behind the scenes as they asked Layla questions. We had some new budget members this year and some new councilors. So all of the work that went into, that the new folks put into preparing for those meetings and working with Layla behind the scenes to prepare was much appreciated, and I think resulted in some very good discussion. So thank you for all of that. We did then have a session which included public comment, and we had that as well this month actually. So tonight we're here to consider 4 resolutions, and then as part of that process, we will be finalizing the budget for this next fiscal year. So I'm going to suggest a method to proceed with the meeting tonight, and then just make sure I have everybody's consent and agreement on that. So since we have spent a good bit of time on the budget and the associated resolutions that we have tonight, we're not planning to read those fully or aloud. We're not planning to have lengthy discussion or presentation on them. The purpose of this meeting is really to confirm and just make sure we don't have any additional questions. It also includes an opportunity for the public to make any comments that they would like to, and that will be included. So what I'm going to do is briefly review the 4 items that we have in front of us to consider tonight. And again, this is the council now, not the full budget committee, because it's the council's responsibility to approve this budget. So we'll review those quickly. Then I will open up the meeting for public comment. We'll hear public comment. 3 minutes is the timeline or time requested that the person use if anyone does have comment tonight. So we'll stick to that. Then we'll close the public comment section of the meeting and see what other, if any other discussion is necessary amongst council members. And following that, we will vote. So does that sound amenable to everyone?
Yes.
Thumbs up is good. Okay, great. Or a nod. A simple nod, Jerry, will suffice. So thank you. Okay. And this is all available in the packet as it usually is. And the details are there as well for anyone following this later. So the first thing we have is a resolution that adopts the budget, levying taxes, categorizing taxes, and makes appropriations for the fiscal year commencing July 1, 2024 through June 30, 2025. That'll be the first thing that we consider. The second resolution declares the city's election to receive state revenue sharing funds for fiscal year 2024-2025. I would add the discussion about those funds, the amounts, et cetera, were discussed in our previous meetings. The third item is a resolution to extend workers' compensation coverage to volunteers for fiscal year 2024-25. Layla, I think this is a practice that was put in place relatively recently, not in the last couple years, maybe the last handful of years. Is that correct? It's not a new practice, in other words. Yeah. And then the fourth has to do with closing. The fourth is really housekeeping, and we spent a good bit of time on this in our meeting. We've simplified and consolidated funds and removed funds that have no longer been relevant for many years. So we went through a great deal of time, and a lot of time went into preparing this to make sure it was done properly. So basically, we'll be closing the old timber management fund, the housing revolving loan fund, the public safety reserve fund, the building reserve fund, the trust fund, the water system development charge fund, the stormwater system development charge fund, and the park system development charge fund. And we'll be creating a new system of development charge funds and renaming the tourism promotion fund and road fund. So I categorize that as housekeeping, and good housekeeping, because it really simplifies the budget. For those of us who've been asked every year, why do we still have that old thing that nobody uses and the money's just been sitting there? Now we got good answers for that, and we're getting ready to do the cleanup this year. A lot of time went into that, so I want to thank staff, and I'll have another thank you for staff when we finish this session. So that is what we're here to consider tonight. And what I'd like to do now is open the floor to a public hearing and public comment on any or all of those above items. So please let us know if there's anything anyone would like to say.
I don't see any hands raised at this time.
Okay. All right, then. So I'm going to close the public comment section of this meeting and come back to our counselors and ask if there are any questions or comments any counselor would like to make before we proceed to vote on each of these individually. So floor is open.
Catherine, I'd like to speak.
Sure, Tom, go right ahead.
Thank you. So this is the first year that I've been involved in reviewing a budget and passing one. And one of the things that I was unaware of that the city does is this indirect cost allocation thing. We've had some public comment about this. When we had the floor open, we received comment from 2 people. But that's really not very much. And even on social media, I haven't seen much in the way of comments. So our people have not really given us any guidance on what to do, except for the one person that's leading the charge on challenging the way we do the indirect cost allocation. And I hope that, if you have questions or concerns about that you've actually gone to the budget and looked at Appendix B, because that lays it out pretty well. The city employees are known as FTEs, and we have 16.5 of them, and 1.5 FTEs are a part of that indirect cost allocation. And this is a formula that the budget committee came up with after a lengthy study. It was adopted last year, and it was understood when it was adopted last year that we would run it for probably about 3 years and reevaluate it. But that doesn't mean we can't look at it now. And so when we had the session where we got the opportunity to ask questions of the city manager about that, I did ask, after 1 year, do you feel like it's working properly? And her response was, yes, it was. I also heard Chip chime in and say that he thought it was working properly, and Kit as well. So I've heard nobody criticize the formula other than this one person in the community. that person wants us to toss the formula in its entirety after 1 year, and instead go to a formula where the city manager would have to justify the quarter of an FTE that she attributes as work that goes towards these indirect costs. She also uses a quarter for the time of the city recorder. And this person would like it if they would keep timesheets. And the person that's the proponent of this idea is Randy Kugler. And it's my understanding from talking to members of the budget committee that this is not the first time that he's suggested this method, but instead has probably been doing it for about 4 or 5 years. And it's not any different suggestion than has been offered before. And yet it's never gotten any traction. I had a chance to talk to Randy on the street a couple of weeks ago. And, he tells me, this is simple and it's easy and it's not that hard. And tells me that actually when he was the city manager, that he did do this. Then I learned that there were some citizens in town that had done public records requests to find those timesheets. And what they found was one. And in that timesheet, with their review, they determined that there was no way that you could break out how much time he was devoting to the water fund in the course of his year. And so it doesn't sit with me that that's the suggestion that's coming from him. And the other thing I learned when I found out about this public records request is that even though Randy tells me that the water fund is sacrosanct and that it's demonstrated by the way that our city charter is written, because our city charter is unusual in that it has a specific sections devoted to the water utility, and it is unusual. He points that out to me. He says it espouses a viewpoint that the citizens of Manzanita want to tread very lightly on this water fund, and yet in his years, apparently, he was using water fund money to pay for the utilities at City Hall. It's kind of not exactly what he's claiming. He claims it's a government transparency issue. And I disagree with that. The city manager is our CEO. She's a professional person. And she does more than just sit at a desk. We expect her to use her intellect as a part of her job performance and her duties. And I used to have to keep track of my time, and I never could keep it really honestly because there were things I would get up in the middle of the night because my mind was racing with things that had to do with stuff at work. And I would get up in the middle of the night and sit down on my computer and bang out stuff. And then to try to figure out whether or not that was fair to bill for something I was doing in my pajamas that I had to look at in the next morning and figure out whether there was any value to it at all. Well, if it was the water fund, I don't know where I would have come out. And so your mind doesn't stop when you walk away. The other thing about requiring a time card, in my view, it's demeaning. I've heard some rumors that the true impetus behind all of this is that he doesn't want to see Layla continue to be the city manager. If that's the case, I'm really sorry that that's it. I don't know how we'd find another one that's doing quite so well. He says he can't see what she's done to merit the 1/4 of an FTE. And I guess I don't think he's looked very hard either, because when I looked, I found that last year we changed the water rates. And so there had to be a water rate study that was done. And I've read this document, and it's over 20 pages long, and it's written in language that unless I get the benefit of an expert to explain it to me, I'm not going to be able to understand things like the meter multiplier It's a complicated document, but in order to get to this, we had to get staff reports, and from what I could tell, there were 3 work sessions associated with ultimately adopting the new water rates. So to suggest that she's not giving us fair time, I just don't get it. The other part of it is that, sometimes I want to say to these people, you ought to be careful what you ask for, because you just might get it. And one of the things that Randy told me when we were standing on the street corner was there was a period of time in the city's history, and at that point he was no longer here, but he had been coming up with, he was using a quarter FTE, but the city got forced to build a water treatment facility. And Jerry Taylor was the city manager then. And what happened was he started devoting so much time to building the water treatment facility that he bumped up that share to 50%. And what Randy has said to me is that subsequent mayors and council then encouraged him to estimate high because they wanted to get the money out of the water fund. So the one thing about this also is that, if you do get what you're asking for, well, our city manager just got us $2.7 million to work on a water project, a capital improvement project, so that we could extend the water system out to the back 9. And as a part of that, we're also going to improve the roads. So how much time will she spend in the upcoming year devoted to that particular project in and of itself, let alone the time that she spent going out and getting that? So I'm going to vote in favor of adopting the budget, but I do have one other issue that I want to talk about, because there was one thing that I was critical of in this budget, and that was the amount that the city manager has attributed to how much she anticipates we're going to spend on professional services. Last year, we spent a lot on the infamous investigation. And because of that, Layla has told me that she believes that that was an aberration, and that we won't have to encounter something like that again. And so she's gone back to budgeting the same way she had done prior to the investigation. So now, at this point, Randy has filed a referendum. He's obtained the requisite signatures on it. We've spent money with our city attorney making sure to perfect the language of the referendum. Now I understand that he's going to seek to file an initiative also, which means that we're going to have additional time spent for professional services. And it's just money, money, money. There's going to be a new water study if any of this is successful. And I'm understanding that actually, in order to land on our feet, we're going to do the water study prior to the election. And so these are all costs that people need to be aware of. So when I think about them, I refer to them in my mind as Kugler costs. And people should understand. I mean, it's nice to have a watchdog. It's nice to have somebody that's not afraid to speak their mind and stand up. And I'm certainly not criticizing him for exercising his constitutional rights, but nothing comes for free. And so I think she should have budgeted more for professional services. But as I said a little bit earlier, I'm going to vote to approve the budget. Thanks.
Thank you, Tom. Do we have other comments or questions from other counselors?
I have a couple of much smaller items to address. I appreciate Tom's comments and certainly agree with some of the sentiments that he shared. But on a couple of smaller notes, I just want to make sure I understand. So, Layla, when we have, it looks like we're essentially going to end up with a combined system development charge fund, but that's obviously going to require careful internal accounting because you can't use part development funds on roads or water on parks. Is that so? You put all the money together, but it's not. It's commingled, but on the books, but you account for it separately by use.
Yeah, that's correct. So they will live in a single fund, and the advantage of that is if, for example, we implement a transportation SDC, we can just add that into that fund. And then, yes, the transfer that will occur, assuming the budget's approved and the resolutions are approved, those will be separate GL accounts and separate line items. And then as we receive that revenue, it will be receipted directly to those line items. So they'll live in the same fund. They'll be audited as part of that fund, but they will be separated by as a line item for each one, and then will be budgeted accordingly.
Okay, and of the funds that are in the of the dollars that are in the various funds that are being closed, did we ever figure out what we have to do with the that revolving loan fund? Does that money go back to somebody, or is it at this point, are we okay to just hang?
Yeah. So, oh, sorry, Jerry.
Well, I know it's been a strange thing. We've talked about it year after year, and I somebody out there ought to be asking for that money. Not so much individuals at this point, but with some agency, some government agency, and it's just not happening, right?
Yeah, that's right. So that's why we're recommending closure of the fund, but then we will maintain those properties, as you can see I think it's in the non-department budget. It will be a separate line item, so we're able to track and keep that money for the time in which we figure out what to do with it. So it will be there, but it will be left in place until we can figure out what to do with those funds.
Yeah. Okay. One other, again, these are all small ball questions, but I noticed in the resolution regarding extending workers' comp, for some reason we specify the city council and the planning commission in a place in that resolution where I would have thought you'd have all city appointed committees. Is there a reason why?
Because those two bodies are the two bodies that actually make decisions. So, for example, budget committee makes recommendations, but the governing body actually makes those decisions. So we provide workers' compensation to the planning commission, not the budget committee or the short-term rental committee, because they do have a decision-making responsibility. So they make legislative and quasi-judicial decisions related to land use. And so that's how they're different and special. Not that the budget committee isn't special or that the STR committee isn't special, but there's a different level of decision-making authority for the planning commission for the city council.
Okay.
Great question.
Not to belabor the point, but it's a little easier to envision the possibility of a workers' comp claim if you're a volunteer working on the parade, or if you're a volunteer working on some kind of public event. So it's harder to see people on council or the planning commission, let alone the other city committees, actually having a claim. I don't mind the resolution. I voted for it every year, but do it as a practical matter. Is there any significant likelihood that we'll ever have a workers' comp claim?
Well, with the cords that we have to set up every time we're at the Pine Grove, it's possible. But
I mean, I've gotten some paper cuts during.
We just follow the best practice advice given to us by our insurance provider.
Okay, all right, fair enough.
But you're correct. I think it's unlikely. Just be safe.
Gotcha. Okay. With that, I yield.
Thank you, Jerry. Very graceful way to finish that. Any comments from anyone else?
Just an even lighter assortment of questions for me on Resolution 24. I noted that we put in the property tax rate of 42 0.4233. And I know we don't really have any say-so in that. That is set by the state. So I'm assuming this is just an acknowledgement that we're accepting that.
That's correct. Yeah. In some cities where they actually have a much higher property tax rate, and I don't know of any that do this, but you can set it lower. You can't set it higher. And so that's one of the actions the Budget Committee takes, as well as recommending approval of using the full freight of what we are allowed to charge in property tax.
Interesting. Also, the resolution talking about receiving the state funds. Would I be correct in saying that that includes the appropriation we got for the water work to support the housing that's coming? Or is that
it's a great question. So actually those funds are included in the transportation fund. So that's receipted as a revenue source in the transportation fund and expended through there. And this is the 2.7 million you're talking about?
Correct.
Brad? Yeah, yes. And then into the water utility. So the revenue sharing are those resources we get from the state that are based on a per capita calculation, and that comes from a range
things
of different
like
sources.
The gas tank, the gas tax that we get a small percentage of, those sorts of things.
Yes.
Okay.
Cigarette tax, etc. Mm-hmm.
I didn't have any other questions. Thank you.
Good. I do not have any questions. I have some comments I want to make at the end of the meeting. So thank you to counselors for raising those questions and expressing perspective on the, particularly from Tom for his first year on going through this. So thank you very much to everyone. I'm going to ask for counselors' help in making motions to approve these A, B, C, and D in your packet. So would someone like to start by making a resolution regarding the adopting the budget?
I will make a motion to adopt by reading title only a resolution of the City Council of the City of Manzanita, Oregon, adopting the budget, levying taxes, categorizing taxes, and making appropriations for the fiscal year commencing July 1, 2024 to June 30, 2025.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I second.
Thank you, Tom. Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right. On to B, state revenue. Who would like to lead us on that?
I'll make a motion that we accept the resolution declaring the city's election to receive state revenue sharing funds for fiscal year 2024-25.
Second?
I'll second that.
Brad, second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay. And C, workers' comp.
I'll make a motion to enact a resolution of the City Council of the City of Manzanita, Oregon, extending workers' compensation coverage to volunteers of City of Manzanita for policy year 2024 and 2025.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Brad. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right. And finally, our housekeeping resolution. Who would like to get going with that?
I'll make a motion. We accept by title only a resolution of the City Council of the City of Manzanita, Oregon, closing the Timber Management Fund, the Housing Resolving Loan Fund, the Public Safety Reserve Fund, the Building Reserve Fund, the Trust Fund, the Water System Development Charges Fund, the Stormwater System Development Charges Fund, and the Park System Development Charges Fund, and creating a new System Development Charges Fund, and renaming the Tourism Promotion and Facilities Fund and the Road Fund. That was a mouthful.
Yeah. If someone seconds that, do they want to read that again or simply second? Tom has seconded. Okay, we'll keep it at that. Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
That's great. So that concludes our business for tonight. And there's a reason that Layla has a smile on her face the way that she does. So I'd just like to take a moment, as you know, I like to do, to thank everyone. So in addition to the counselors who are on the call, as well as Linda Kozlowski, we have been greatly aided in the efforts this year, as we always are, by the 5 citizen members of the Budget Committee. And I want to send out express appreciation to Jim Dopp, who served as our chair this year, who stepped up to the plate to do that following the many years storied career of Dave Dillon as the chair of that committee in Manzanita. So thank you, Jim. Thank you also to Chip Greening and to Kit Keating, now veteran members of that committee, and to our newer members, Joy Nord, and I see Joy is here tonight. Thank you, Joy, and Jeffrey Sunshine. So that committee in total, the 10 of us, did a good job this year. More importantly, we were given a good work product to deal with and to consider. I've said this in the last 2 years, every year when I was on the Budget Committee prior to joining council, the improvement, the exponential improvement in growth in the quality of this city's budget in terms of how it is prepared, in terms of the long-range thinking that's gone into it, now in terms of improvements that are just making it more efficient and effective to manage as a tool for the city. The addition and work on the capital improvement plans, the long-range plans for that, which gives us an action plan to work from when we do get funding or we are ready for a capital project. The work and thought and deliberation that has gone into revenue forecasting, given the fact that our revenue base is not the absolutely predictable property taxes that once upon a time did pay for cities. Those days are well behind the cities in Oregon, thanks to some interesting tax legislation many years ago. And so now we've got, I won't call it a burden, I'm going to call it a responsibility and a privilege to look at that revenue stream in a very thoughtful way and in a conservative way to make sure that the city is funded well beyond the terms of anybody sitting in this call tonight or who has participated. That is one of the most important duties that we have as a city. And cumulatively, although we do face challenges, and no doubt we will in the future, our ability and my confidence in our ability to do that has never been greater. I was listening this week, as I always do, to a call that we do with the county commissioners and a number of the county officials that happens every Tuesday morning, and on KTIL, at 8 o'clock our time. And one of the county commissioners was talking about the challenges that the county, which we are a part of as well. And so I have sympathy for the county and the people who are working on those budgets. But they're having, our county that we belong in is having a very challenging time this year with budget, as they have for the last few. And in the words of Doug Olson, a very experienced county commissioner and political figure, they are now eating their seed corn. They've dipped into reserves this year, and that's what they did to balance their budget. We continue to work hard and prepare in such a way that we will never have to do that except in the most dire of circumstances. And I know that every single person involved with the preparation of this budget, from Layla through our finance staff, through every single person who put this budget together and presented it, takes that responsibility very seriously. So I want to thank everybody for that. It's not always the most exciting of conversations. Sometimes it can be. You've got to learn a lot. Government financing and funding is a different world for many of us, different than we grew up in, and everybody put a great effort into understanding that and contributing in the best way that they could this year. So with that lengthy thank you, I want to say thank you to Layla and staff and to everybody who participated. And hopefully I have not talked so long as to deprive you from a nice evening with your families following this meeting. So without further ado, thanks again, and I call this meeting adjourned. My eyes are failing me. What's the time, please?
6:34.
At 6:34. Thanks so much and have a great night.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
everyone.
Bye.